Someone sent me a DM telling me that no matter what type of concealer they used, they felt like their under eye hyperpigmentation continuously peeked through their makeup, and when they went to go add more foundation or more concealer, it just looked blotchy. So I want to walk you through a couple of key steps that will help you get a flawless under eye. Step one is skin prep. And when we were DMing back and forth, I said, tell me everything that you use to prep your skin with. And when she listed off everything she used, there really was nothing wrong with her routine. It was a lot of hydrating agents, but let me tell you that I had to really load up with hydrating products underneath the eye and for the face at night. That way it has lots of time to absorb into the skin, and the next morning when I go to put on makeup, I'm not having a ton of product through here, because when you go to put concealer on top of heavy creams and eye serums, that concealer will slip off. So to prep my skin, I went with MAC Fix Plus because it really wets the skin. I followed up with a serum, and I mainly focused it on the outer edges of the face, and then with whatever was left on my fingers, I lightly tapped it underneath the eye, but I didn't really focus on the under eye area. Now I'm going to go in with an eye cream, but you really don't need a lot. This is Murad, and I'm just going to take a tiny bit. And the key here is to use less product, but make sure that it's really distributed and pushed into the skin, because if it's sitting on top of the skin and it's not fully absorbed, anything you put on top of it is going to slide around. You want to think about this like wet paint. You have to let this dry down before you can layer anything on top of it. Two is to really let your products dry down. So when I apply color corrector or any type of concealer, if I apply it and immediately blend it out, look at how sheer that product gets. That's not a bad thing, but if you are wanting to use less product and have that product stay in place all day, try this. Apply your color corrector and let that dry for at minimum a minute. It's going to feel crazy because you're like, what am I doing? But the longer you let this dry down, the more locked in it is. If you shear it out immediately, what this does is dilutes the coverage and your hyperpigmentation might still peek through. But when you let it dry down, it builds an opacity, meaning that it kind of stays in place and it's harder to push around, and your under eye darkness will not peek through. Now that it's been about a minute, you can see that the concealer is starting to look more matte, and as we blend it out, it's a little bit harder to push around. We have more coverage and it sticks to the skin so much more. So we're just going to add some on through here like this and let this dry down. Okay, about a minute has passed, so now I'm just going to tap this concealer out. You can see that it's a little tougher to push around because it's dried down and locked into place, meaning that it will stay put and not let that under eye darkness break through. Step number 4 is to also let your concealer that you're putting on top of this dry down. Now, if you do have oily skin, I'm going to do one little step in between that's going to help seal this in place and reinforce it even more. You're going to take a brightening powder and an eyeshadow brush and take just a little bit, like really you don't want a lot of product, and lightly tap it over the orange. What this does is create an invisible wall that seals in the orange so that when you go to put your concealer on top of it, it doesn't mix in. And this also lightly soaks up any excess moisture or oil you have in this area. If you have drier skin, I would skip this step, but if you run oily or you do struggle with your orange bleeding through, prep your under eyes just the way I showed you with a little light layer of eye cream, and then seal your color corrector in with a powder. Now we're going to go in with your concealer over it, tapping on the concealer, and now we're going to let this dry. While this is drying, I want to talk to you about a step that I do show at times, and it's to spray your face with Fix Plus in between these layers, but this is really going to work best for you if you have dry skin. If you have oily skin or you're new to color correcting, this is one extra step that will hydrate your face, but you don't need to do it in between these layers, because what you're doing when you do this is you're diluting this product and you're thinning it out, but that thinning might actually be why you are having that breakthrough hyperpigmentation. So skip this step for now. Okay, now that concealer has had some time to dry down, I'm just going to take a little brush and push the concealer into place, looking up so I can get in between all of the little crevices. And you can see in real time that because this is dried down, it's not as movable, it's not as pliable, it's not drying because we did use an eye cream, and it's not mixing in with the orange because we have that powder layer as a barrier. Now the under eyes are concealed, it's time to set it with powder. And because this is a small area and it is also very delicate, I like to use small eyeshadow brushes. You're going to dip into your powder of choice. I personally like foundation powders. Grab your eyeshadow brush and look up and lightly tap powder over this under eye area, really getting powder into the crevices that might crease up later. And I'm just adding powder in light layers and building up. Then with whatever's left on the brush, I just push it into this inner corner and then kind of lightly sweep, but I'm not really aggressively rubbing. I'm tapping on light layers. And this is so that we don't disrupt the makeup underneath that we just worked so hard on while still locking it all in. Got the difference between this eye that's been set with the powder foundation versus this. This is beautiful. This is very skin-like and there are no traces of hyperpigmentation breaking through, but this just looks a little bit more lifted. And this is just the L'Oreal Infallible powder. It's a drugstore foundation powder, and a little bit of it goes a very long way. This is in the color Vanilla 120. So I'm just tapping slowly. And in real time, you can see this under eye lift. And because you're using a small brush, it allows you to really get into this inner corner and push the product into the skin versus a bigger brush that would be like sifting product everywhere and not very focused. And now just kind of tap powder out around the edges. So just to review, step 1, skin prep. You can do super hydrating skin prep. Just leave it to the outer edges of the face, and when it gets to the under eye, less is more. And I'm not saying to skip the under eyes because I do go in with an eye cream. You just want to use light layers and let it fully absorb into the skin before going in with your makeup. Step 2, apply your color corrector, but let it dry down. Letting it dry down builds the opacity and allows it to really grip to the skin, providing long-lasting coverage with hyperpigmentation that will not creep through. Step number 3, you want to seal in that color corrector. If you're dry, you want to use just a tiny bit of this, but if you're oily, this step is going to be key for you. You have to seal in the color corrector so that anything you put on top of it doesn't blend in. Step number 4, I want you to skip the hydrating setting spray. We don't want to water down or thin out any formulas because we're trying to build intensity and we're trying to build coverage so that that grayness doesn't peek through. You can still use this at the end of your makeup routine. Just stick to the outer edges of the face and cover the eyes so that you don't dilute any makeup in here. And tip number 5, I want you to set your under eyes with a foundation powder. Foundation powders have more coverage, so a little bit of this goes a really long way. You're also going to use an eyeshadow brush. This is small and it fits beautifully underneath the eye. Anything bigger than this will apply too much product and we will lose control of the application. So smaller brushes are better. And those were 5 flawless under eye tips. I'm going to finish off the rest of my hair and makeup off camera and I will come back to show you the finished look. Back with the hair done, I did not add anything to the face except for mascara. I just wanted to show you the under eyes. Normally I would go in and bake with a loose powder, but I wanted to stop at this step just to show you that if you have a really solid base with the under eye, you can skip the baking if you want. Hopefully this is helpful. Let me know if you have any questions.